Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Devarius Peoples, the Chief Information Officer G6 for the Army Corps of Engineers, Paul Puckett, the Director of the Enterprise Cloud Management Office for the Army CIO, Bob Costello, Executive Director at the Border Enforcement and Management Systems Directorate for the Office of Information and Technology at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Varesh Garg, the Head of Customer Reliability Engineering at Equinix Government Solutions, and Bill Church, the Chief Technology Officer at F5 Government Solutions. Gentlemen, welcome to the discussion. Before we get started, let me set some context for our panel today. As one agency CIO recently commented to me, the coronavirus pandemic is a black swan event of sorts. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence that forces agencies to rethink with urgency how they'll go about meeting their mission. The surge in remote working, the need to adapt federal services to online platforms is both a success story, but also a cautionary tale. The workforce and mission transition has seen an increase in an attack surface where bad actors, malicious users, and bots are creating unprecedented challenges for agencies to secure and deliver mission-critical applications and support services. Agencies must adapt to bring in more components that make up a zero-trust architecture to counter these threats. Security experts say through zero trust, agencies can section off their network to better protect data and systems from network island hopping and real and potential vulnerabilities. And if the agency is in the cloud, dividing networks and data can happen more seamlessly based on the governance and standards they put together. Before agencies can just jump into zero trust in the cloud, there are several things to consider, including what data will be stored in the cloud, how the cloud environment can be monitored, and what security access controls make the most sense for the system, data, and users. So with this context in place, let's turn to our panel to find out how they're addressing many of these and other challenges in moving to a zero trust approach in the cloud. Devarius, let me start with you at the Army Corps of Engineers. Your cloud strategy, the multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, discuss how that all fits together.
Yeah, so within USACE right now, our cloud strategy is really based on ongoing operating assumptions as we plan for more sort of a multi-cloud domain solution. And many factors have went into the decision in which it is that we've made. But the primary motivation behind the overall strategy is that the cloud market and the services that are available are very competitive. They're very diverse, and there's really no intent to constrain the possibilities of the services in which it is that we're looking to achieve or receive from a specific provider. Right now within the Corps of Engineers, we support many diverse missions, whether it's the civil works aspects of things from water management, project management, as well as military construction on the military program side of the house. And with that type of footprint, it's large and it crosses many different domains, even across the globe. And those are the various aspects that we support. So being able to have a multi-cloud approach allows us to be able to meet the mission in many different ways.
And when we talk about the multi-cloud approach, are we talking about also on-premise and off-premise cloud? Is it a government-only cloud? What, generally speaking, a little bit of everything, I imagine.
It is. It's a little bit of everything. We have a multi-hybrid. It was a hybrid approach on-prem as well as in the cloud, trying to identify which capabilities really need to go in a cloud smart manner to be able to make sure we make wise investments as it pertains to cloud. Also looking at the various data exchanges as it goes from multiple cloud environments as well. So we have a very diverse offering when it comes to the delivery of applications into the cloud.
Let's move over to Paul Puckett from the Army CIO. Imagine, like Devarius talked about, you guys have a very similar setup and even a more diverse environment in many ways.
Oh, absolutely. I think even with Dr. Peoples talking about the Corps of Engineers, it's a great vignette for kind of a use case within the Army for the complexity of our architecture. We've got to look at the way that cloud has been adopted to date across commercial clouds, both public capabilities, as well as bringing some of those commercial capabilities, on-premise in a private cloud. But then even, with the Corps of Engineers, they've got a massive distributed architecture globally, which means that the way that we share and exchange data across each one of those platforms is really critical, which means that we need to be able to integrate that data in some type of common data fabric. And we need to have an enterprise ecosystem that actually complements the way that we exchange that data, but also doing so securely. But Corps of Engineers is but one use case across all the components of the Army. And so, like, for instance, my office is responsible for that kind of greater cloud strategy for the Army and how we're going to make sense of all these disparate systems. And the critical component here is the way that we actually adopt cloud. We need to start doing some of the more common things in a common way and really just providing that as a service. So some of the distinct and kind of nuanced and fit for purpose capabilities of commercial cloud or even on-premise capabilities is the place where we're investing our time specific to the mission. And so my office is responsible kind of the common services side of the house and that common strategy. And then it allows the various components like the Corps of Engineers to then be able to invest in that really value add capability that they need for the mission. But for us to do so in an integrated way that doesn't create more stovepipes in the cloud, but actually allows us to start to share data securely, but more freely across the Army.
The old cloud creep, or as some people sometimes the siloed approach to cloud, what we saw early on, you want to make sure you stay away. So I imagine your strategy is focused on standards, governance, kind of that 50,000 foot view. So someone like DeVaris Peoples or another part of the Army can get into that 20,000, 10,000, 5,000 foot view.
Yeah, precisely. And it's the security relevant side of the house there is just so important because really when we look how capabilities are brought to bear typically, it means we have to impact all the way into the acquisition side of the house and making sure all the thou shalt statements were correct in the way that was competed, that we're actually bringing all of the right components to field a solution in the cloud securely. What we want to do is essentially simplify the complexities that typically reside there, provide some common standards and governance for how those services need to be provided, and then actually just provide those services as a service to the Army. So that we don't even have to, from an acquisition standpoint, worry whether we got all the thou shalts right. It simply becomes an integration of thou shalt be hosted within these secure ecosystems that then allows the acquisition itself and the competing side of the house to really focus on what that true value add is for the mission capability.
Let's move over to Bob Costello from Customs and Border Protection Directorate. Bob, you guys also have the type of environment that is wide ranging. You go from the desert all the way to the snowy hills. So you got to be somehow and deal with all the different environments. Talk a little bit about your cloud strategy.
Sure. No, thanks for having me today, Jason. And everyone brought up some really good points. I think our strategy is continuously evolving as technology changes. We had some initial initiatives a few years ago that have changed. We're adopting SaaS offerings faster than we ever had before. So we're doing another rationalization of many of our applications to say, well, many of them shouldn't be moved out of our existing data center into our cloud environments, but they make sense to re-platform them into a SaaS offering. And that's a lot of the work I'm doing over in border enforcement and mission systems, where I do all the application development for Border Patrol and Air Marine, as well as our mission systems as well, like financial systems and stuff like that. A lot of those new modernization efforts, the existing applications will continue to spin in our on-prem data center, and then we'll migrate to SaaS offerings as those are developed and come online. I think our zero trust environment, which happens over in my infrastructure shop, I cover a couple different areas over here in OIT. One of the things that we have to do is we talk about, how do we identify people? So we have a number of big projects going on right now to kind of identify how many different systems we have that are associated with a person's identity. And unfortunately, it's a lot, even at a mid-sized agency like CBP, which has about 70,000 users that we deal with, although hundreds of thousands of users of our applications. So that's been a big challenge, and that's part of our cloud strategy. I think on zero trust, one of the things that we're working really hard on within CBP is how do we break down those silos of data? And that's one of the big problems. If you have silos on-prem and you don't address them before you move, you just replicate the problem in the cloud. So that's a big challenge that we're working through right now, is trying to make sure that as we migrate to the cloud or other vendors' solutions, that it makes sense. Because like Paul and Dr. Peoples, we have these systems that people's lives depend on. So I can't have a lot of downtime. And if it's running very well on-prem or running very well in a colo, you have to ask yourself, does it make sense to migrate it if I can't assure the same level of reliability and performance in the cloud? So we're taking a really hard look at a lot of our systems right now to make sure we weren't moving too fast before, to just say, well, we have to get out of our data center, to are we doing the right thing for the operators? Because that's really the most important thing.
Bob brings up some great points when it comes to being smart about what the actual mission set is, what the data set is, and whether it even makes sense to relocate those capabilities to another hosting environment. And this is actually part of our transition and our learning even within the Army. A lot of our adoption of cloud capabilities to date has been driven by data center consolidation and closures, which means a lot of the effort that's been taken is really just kind of a rehosting lift and shift. And we're finding that for some of those mission systems, right, the availability of the system actually seems to not be better in the cloud because we didn't put the actual thought to design those systems or redesign those systems in a way that leverages cloud computing and that elastic nature and scalability. But we see it's also tied to not just an availability of the service, but an availability of the data. And what we're finding is the systems that have been built in our data centers within the fixed architecture and requirements that they were designed to weren't designed for this ad hoc world that we find ourselves in, where perhaps some data set is actually needed in real time to support a mission thread that we have, but the system doesn't have the compute to be able to handle that kind of extra load. And we're seeing those are the kind of key opportunities for us to really get after what data sets matter, understanding the systems that are brokering those data sets, and then can we actually increase the availability of the data? So it's not so much the availability of the system itself, but just the data sets and the ad hoc nature for how we call on it. And it's part of our cloud smart transition from typically the cloud first model that we see. And then it allows us to be more thoughtful as to the right framework, right? The SaaS model, whether it's replatforming, just all the different, ways that you can essentially leverage cloud thoughtfully, for us is being driven more by the data sets behind it. And our accommodation to this very dynamic and ever-changing world around us is what data sets we really need to unlock their future potential.
Let me bring in our friends from the industry. Varesh, react a little bit to what you're hearing from Paul, from Bob, from Devarius around their cloud strategy. Are you seeing very similar things from your customers and others who are using Equinix government solutions?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we are. And, I want to highlight, Equinix is its own cloud strategies, right? From our perspective, our cloud strategy is also multi-cloud and hybrid. We have decided to leverage multiple cloud providers based on their capabilities. There are some parts of the technologies, and I want to highlight 3 examples. We have a centralized logging framework that is used by a lot of applications that are on-prem and in cloud. We have IoT sensors that collect a lot of data from our data centers. We also have, networking software that, deals with all the switches and routers that are deployed in our data centers, right? So some of those things have to be on-prem and close to our data centers. But then, rest of our products and portals are in cloud. Also in our cloud strategy, we are going to cloud to take advantage of the elasticity, efficiency, and agility that cloud provides, especially in the area of multi-region, multi-AZ, and the availability that all of those features give you. But at the same time, our strategy is to be cloud native, but not have vendor lock-in. And what that means is that the way we write the code and data is to make sure that we can move our code, microservices code and data between different clouds whenever we want. The other thing that is unique to our strategy is that we recently acquired a company called PUCKETT. And for our non-production environments, we wanted to get the agility, elasticity, flexibility, and all the other advantages of cloud without the cost of cloud. So part of our hybrid strategy also is to move our lower environments and our non-production environments on PUCKETT.
So Varesh, let me bring you back around for a second, though. You set us up kind of how Equinix kind of looks at this approach to cloud and how you guys are using cloud. But what about your customers? As you're talking to your customers, do what you're hearing from Paul and Bob and Devarius really match up? Or do you see a lot of people re-looking at the applications versus just, cloud?
Yeah, I think most of our customers are adopting a cloud-first strategy. And I think one of the unique things that we are seeing now is that, most customers do not want to lock into one cloud vendor solution for multiple reasons. And I think, one of the trend that we are seeing is that a lot of customers that are adopting multi-cloud, for things that have to go across clouds, whether it is their networking infrastructure like load balancers and routers and switches and firewalls, or whether it is their data that needs to be accessed in multiple clouds, right? They're trying to find the edge locations where they can put, those networking devices and data and other kind of things in that their multi-cloud architecture. And I think, one of the trend that we are seeing is for customers to continue to use cloud for their workload and then rely on Equinix, Colo or Equinix bare metal or other Equinix edge services to make sure that the common services can then be hosted in Equinix, right? So the edge computing is becoming a huge part of customers' multi-cloud infrastructure. And that's where I think Equinix's physical and virtual services are playing a big role in customers' multi-cloud strategy.
I'm sure we'll talk more about edge. Let me just bring in Bill Church from F5 real quick. Bill, one of the things about what you heard today is there's that mention of zero trust, which we'll get back to probably in the next segment. But give me a reaction from F5's perspective. What do you, when you hear everyone talk about cloud, what are you seeing? How does it fit into what you guys are seeing broadly?
Well, I'll say there's a couple things that gave me a little bit of comfort of being a citizen for one. You know, I like the idea of the cloud smart approach versus the cloud first. So, you know, taking a look at the data and look at the resources and seeing, does it make sense for this to go to the cloud? You know, there's a lot of specialized applications and hardware that does exist on-prem that may not necessarily be replicable in the cloud today. You know, one thing that comes to mind is there's only one IRS with only one tax code, right? So you know, those mainframe source code that's been produced for quite a long time probably isn't the first thing you'd throw up into you know, a cloud data center. So you know, hearing that you know, is good to know. The other thing I heard too was identity, you know, and that's definitely a very important part of this move to cloud. When you start getting into systems and applications that you don't, you know, technically own, you know, you don't own that infrastructure anymore. Identity becomes very important, and knowing who is in there and whether or not they should be in there is, you know, something that I think we have to pay a lot of attention to. When we think zero trust, you know, it is kind of the Wild West in the sense that we're not, or we shouldn't be allowed to just, you know, have blanket policies that open up traffic to, you know, our applications and systems. Those connections need to be known, and they need to be validated to make sure that they're not, you know, just some random person coming in trying to extract data for malicious purposes.
All right, there's a lot to follow up there. Let's take a quick break and come back. We can jump into that discussion about zero trust. I know it came up a couple of times during the discussion so far, but let's take a quick break. You're listening to the panel discussion, Zero Trust in a Hybrid Cloud Environment, sponsored by Equinix Government Solutions and F5 Government Solutions on Federal News Network.